trying to keep the positioning perfect, not overcommit, and I've wasted a heavy tank there. But my tanks are superior to my opponents, I know that.
Battle control initialized.
Hello there, comrades and cannon fodder. It's Dvoid here. I've got a 1v1 multiplayer game, and we're on Desert Strike for this map. I'm using Russia in red, my opponent's in green using England, and we've got a couple of spectators for this one. Let's go to production tab. And this map, Desert Strike, I like this one, but you've got two neutral capture structures, two neutral tech structures like oil derricks, two of them in the centre, so this is the early game area where it's most likely to be contested. There are no hospitals or extra oil derricks, etc. And I've sent out a few rifles just to clear the way for my engineer. My opponent's done the same, but with 4 rifles. I've used 3. So we've got our engineers heading that way. Now, these rifles were supposed to move on straight away, but they're clearing the oil derrick, make sure it's safe for the engineer. And then a few moments later, these guys will have caught up. But I'm trying to go to both sides. My opponent, he's already got his capture underway. So, and his engineer is well guarded. Yeah, he's vulnerable from this side, but that's soon sorted. Look. And my closest rifleman is idle anyway. Now, my opponent sent their engineer back, and I know that they've got forces there. But seeing a rifleman around may have prompted them to get him out, to, you know, bunch up the troops. And I'm shooting at barrels that aren't there. You see, until you uncover that area, the barrels will still be there, but the enemy cleared them out long ago. And because I've lost those few rifles, I've decided to back off. So I'm hanging around here by the oil derrick. Now, it's at least one area you can stay forward of your base a little bit when you capture your oil derricks in the early game, because you can use the view range as an advantage. So you wouldn't want to be here or here, you know, when there's no point. You may as well be with your oil derrick, use the view range and use it for a defensive position. And stop your opponent also taking that oil derrick as well. If you can find a way to knock out the opponent's oil derrick, it's a worthy early game goal. Now my opponent's got medics and they're training rocket soldiers. I've got a couple there. And their engineers in home base. It's not the best place to leave your engineer because there's nothing else protecting it. The infantry production are leaving straight away, but if your opponent was to go war factory first, they'd find this guy quite easily. You know, you could drive a ranger or an APC, etc. through the enemy base, and if you go war factory first, there's very little chance that your opponent's going to be able to destroy it quickly. So, and if you approach from the edges and, you know, approach from shady angles, your vehicle can quickly move through the enemy base and get you some scouting information. But it's easy to find an engineer like that and capture it. That's why, because just in case your enemy does go war factory first and produces a vehicle, that's why you don't leave your engineer in the base like that. It'd be better off at the back somewhere, or better still, somewhere random along the side of the map. That's what I'm looking for here, look. See, this rifle guard is looking for engineers hidden at the edge of the map. And this one is also doing the same. Because a lot of good players, once their engineer, because you've only got the 1 oil derrick, 2 at most to capture. So once your engineer's fairly idle until the game moves on and there's other things for him to capture, it's just sat there doing nothing. So a lot of players either go for an early capture, but I don't rate that because they won't get past standard rifle guards. But other good players, they'll leave their engineer somewhere out of the way for later in the game, in a random place hidden somewhere that's not easy to find, and then later in the game they can hopefully make use of their engineer. I'm bringing mine with my small frontline army at this point. Keep your keep your engineer safe and close, because, like I say, most players, their engineer goes idle at this point, whereas I am, and even sometimes later in the game, they're just forgotten and left. But I think engineers are a very valuable unit and are well worth using later in the game, and that's one of the reasons I like to try and keep my APC alive, obviously for screening in the early game, but it's good for Gren drops and transporting engineers. But my rifle scout on move command walked straight past the enemy engineer. That was silly. And there, my opponent's got their MCV built, the second one. I have as well, but mine's not moving out just yet. Yeah, there he goes. He's off. And my opponent's got their MCV well escorted, their second one. And I've got this small starting army. Let's just see how many rockets. I've got 5. That's all right. That's an all right little early raid force. But it's best as a hit and run force because it won't stand up to the opponent's starting army all on its own. But I am often wary of bundling all my units together for an early attack because, you know, I've done very little scouting at this point, only that rifle that's moved through here. So I don't know a lot, but if you were to lose that, you see, I know there's obviously an expansion here, but I spotted that camo pillbox. I'm hoping for ore trucks as my target. There we go. And my opponent's responded immediately by getting his ore truck out of there. And yes, it survived. I was going to go for a power plant, but these guys are fleeing. And now my opponent, I need an eco transfer, but my opponent has got light tanks and rangers. They're going to run down this force, what few are left. So I got nothing for that attack. My opponent is even repairing his ore trucks. Now, leave your ore trucks to repair to half health on their own. They'll do that for free. Then if you want to repair them, do so. But there's not much need, to be fair. It's interrupting your mining. They may as well be mining instead. But my opponent will see that. I thought, I have to, now I know that my opponent has chased me over here, their army's out of position, I have to do something. So I know this hasn't got an expansion, so it leaves this. But I've noticed that oil derrick will have revealed my positioning, and my opponent noticed it, and they're responding. So I've got a large army waiting for me. Now that's, you don't attack that, it's stupid. I've got 11 grand, my opponent's got 15. So 16 grand now, I don't want to do that. So I'm falling back, and in case they pursue me, I'm bringing my MCV, my second one, and I'm gathering up what units I can to try and make a stand. And I know that they've gone this way looking for an expansion, and I was about to set that up. But, so they did that, it was a perfect move that, but I've got a strong defensive position. And now I'm pursuing my opponent because I saw them retreat straight away. And at this point, I can just easily fall back, but what they're doing is they're actually leading me onto base defences. And they've got artillery already, and I haven't heard it firing yet, so I'm not aware, but it soon will. Now, there we go, look. And I immediately have to turn around and fall back. And at this point, I'll notice the artillery firing. The sound will give it away, but look at their shells. They're hitting their light vehicles up front, and they killed every one of them. Except for a light tank straggling at the back, they killed every one of their frontline vehicles. That's because they're so quick, rangers and light tanks. They move straight into the path of their own barrage, a creeping barrage, chasing my retreating troops. That's fair enough, but you don't want it hitting your own troops like that. And I had to send some tanks to try and fight with this force. Realised they were too late, so I've turned back. This force has to go on its own without screening units, but I nearly caught that MCV, but I had to back off with some. I couldn't leave my front lines completely undefended. But that just made it look. By the time I was aware, it's gone. And I'm hoping for an eco raid. Now, those artillery are actually shooting at a base defence that is long gone. I'll show you. Yeah, you see that because they haven't revealed that terrain, they still think it's there. But it's only because they're not paying full attention. This is where their attention is, and I've shredded 3 ore trucks. Not bad. That's a nice counter to what they did. But you see that flame tower's still there, according to their view range. Now, that's destroyed long ago, but it's only because they're busy elsewhere. As soon as that's revealed, the target's gone. And they're switching to another target, look. So let's see, not disable shroud, we want everyone's point of view. Yeah, they're going for this area, but it's at least something to delay the enemy with. And I got a couple of tanks, look, they're on an eco raid. Now, it's not a lot, but 2 heavy tanks can... You see what they do to this auto, look, you see? A few salvos and it's like, see ya. So now they can move on. Pillboxes are just sort of like irritation to heavy tanks as long as you move on. Now, I moved this, I placed an expansion here in a shady position because my opponent's already checked there. But as soon as I set that up, I've moved over here. And I have discovered my opponent has got this here, but I can't deploy there, I'm struggling, and I've also tried to fall back here to make a defence, a stand, because my opponent's got 24,000 value, 25,000 value army, I've got 20, and that's like one of the better situations for this game. You know, I was a fair way behind at some points, and there you go, I've lost that vehicle. Now, these mechanics can go inside destroyed enemy vehicles. You see, they brought that heavy tank back to life, and now they're getting this one as well. You see, that wreck has been brought back to life. They now belong to the enemy, and they've got an attack on at the same time, but the mechanics that are left alive can then heal those mechanics, those heavy tanks that they've captured, the wrecks. They can heal them up to full health. That's a nice tasty flame tower, doing a lot of damage to my own refinery. And they're caught between that flame tower and this force you're done for. So I should have had at least this group at the back moving over to here, look, but I was ready to retask them. So that's something. But now I've got an eco transfer over here, and this MCV is out of the fight. I'm trying to make some use of it while also I've got my hands full. But the army values have just switched. I'm at 20, they're at 19.5. So it's changed, that situation has changed slightly. There's my engineer, but like I say, there's the mechanics. They are fixing those heavy tanks. When you repair them, they don't repair the wreck with a mechanic. That costs you 500, obviously, but they have very little health. So you need to either immediately send them to the service depot for repairs, or use your other mechanics to heal them up to full health for free. And I thought the situation's desperate. My opponent's moving out all over, and I know he's up in this corner because my MCV spotted it, this one. So I know he's all over. I'm expecting attacks, but I had to do something. And this group, I was trying to lead the enemy away, saw it didn't work. So the enemy had tried to rally here to fight with their base, which was the perfect choice. But that left me with very few choices, and I had to press on. So what this situation, what I thought was my heavy tanks are the only real asset I've got that's going to do any good in this situation. I'm losing an army for very little. So I thought, right, I'll try and have a construction yard, but while your tanks are firing, they can move, and the ones at the back taking fire, move them on if you can. That's not getting away. And watch, because they've got mechanics, I'm shooting that wreck. I'm not having them repairing that wreck. I'm not wasting all that time. Now I'm down to 2 heavy tanks from that whole army. And my opponent has spotted this, because they've placed a camo pillbox next to it. Now they've got an engineer, and as soon as he starts the capture, that is lost to me. Now I can't place defences to kill him, I can't place structures, the build radius is red, look. So that means unless I kill the engineer, this now belongs to him. It's a matter of 13 seconds to capture. So, you know, the only way to stop that is to kill that engineer. And it was, and I thought at this point, when I saw that, because just before it was captured by the enemy, I caught sight of it and thought, oh dear, that's far from ideal. So I'm left with this one here, down in this desperate little expansion at the bottom. Look, there's a couple of rocket soldiers waiting to see who turns up, because I'm defending that whole field. I'm not having anyone take it from me. Right, there you go. Look, artillery. Don't let the mechanic get killed. And you see, they've taken another wreck and another, and they can now repair them to full health. Although they are getting low on mechanics. But here we go. We've got the Black Hawks. They have a brilliant view range, the best in the game. Black Hawks are as good as anything. Yaks and Black Hawks are probably equal. But the Black Hawks hover, Yaks go in a circle. Right now, because of this, my opponent's ahead in army value again. We're both at 23, but my opponent's ahead. So I thought I was going for tech. That's why I've got a Soviet tech center. I was trying to go for an Iron Curtain. But because of this situation and what's just happened, I've lost that whole army. I thought, right, I've got to do something. So I added an APC to my tanks build queue. And I put 3 thieves, and I've got 2 engineers in that APC. So now I'm launching an attack. I'm aiming to overrun this area here. That's my objective, because I'm thinking, well, I'm in big trouble. They've got 3 MCVs, for crying out loud, 3 Conyards. And look, they're repairing, but now this drops off the engineers and thieves, but they're very low on cash. But the engineers have to go first, because when a thief infiltrates, the enemy know. But if I start to capture first, it doesn't matter, they can't sell it. So there's an infiltration. I got 500, because you get your money back for a thief, even if the enemy has no cash. But what the point is to wreck all this and hold their money supply. See, I've reset the capture bar, so it doesn't take long to start building up cash. And I've had 2 infiltrations there. I've got another one standing by. So it's just to keep my opponent's money supply low, and they're hitting me here. Let's just keep an eye on things. I've slowed the game speed down a little, and I've captured that refinery, and I am capturing the war factory. I've got the barracks covered if anyone has a problem with my capturing. These guys are moving on, and because I've captured that, I want the other refinery to be captured, then infiltrated. And I've got this force here, I noticed I was being attacked, and this is all that's standing in the way. You know, a couple more barracks and base defences would have made a lot of difference there, for a tank or 2, but look how many artillery pieces my opponent's pounding me with. And why has the oil derrick gone? Has it been destroyed? Yeah, I was wondering about that. But I've got that war factory, captured that, and we have another infiltration. And my opponent's got over 5 grand, so this infiltration is going to be a nice one. Yeah, 2,600 over. And this is the whole point of this area here, is to buy time. Because as far as I was aware, I had a large enemy army, and I know the artillery was coming heavy. And my opponent's bringing its base push as well. Very nice work. They've got my tanks, very nice. But I had to respond, I had to do something and start to whittle down these numbers. Now, base defences, they're starting to do a lot of damage. Their own artillery, firing at the wrong targets are going to do damage to them as well. But this force arriving and me seeing all this, I thought, right, hang on a minute, this is actually good. Because they've been whittled down. Look, those flame towers, just brutal. And those artillery pieces are going to find themselves on their own. There you go. And it's left this vulnerable, but I've got my APC, and there's 3 engineers in that. So while he's distracted and being overrun, the engineers get out quickly, right next to the construction yard, and as soon as the capture's on it, that's it. You see, the build radius circle is red. He can't place a base defence to stop it. His only option is to sell the power plant, kill the engineer with the technicians and maybe a rifleman that comes out. But I've got 3 engineers, and they'll be lucky to kill even 1. So that was a bad situation. And I've also built another MCV so I can build more. But I took all this from my opponent. So losing this base, yeah, it was bad, but I've replaced it. I've replaced it with my opponent's war factory. I've got 2. So it didn't matter so much losing this one. But sadly for my opponent, they left the service depot intact. And I believe they could have destroyed the service depot with that first early attack. And it would have left me relying on APCs, and the single advantage I had in this battle was having more main battle tanks than my opponent. They relied on light tanks, rangers, artillery, and my destroyed wrecks to fill out their own main battle tank force. So that was my sole advantage. If they had destroyed my service depot early on, even if they'd have lost that force like they did, it could have made a lot of difference, and that my only advantage for this game could have been gone. I nearly lost the battle anyway. That large force that came across and hit me here could have swept everything away. If I hadn't started to mess with their money supply and start to capture stuff here, then it could have gone very differently. It was a turnaround towards the end. And like I say, my heavy tanks, my main battle tank advantage kept me in that one. So I'm going to go through graphs and charts for this. Yeah, look at that. I mean, I did have a slight lead, but my opponent was ahead for the main part of that battle, and then again towards the end. Very nice, and we were both suffering losses. It's just, yeah, I managed to hold on and had a reasonable size army towards the end. So you can see that my opponent did very well, but you can't have your main battle tanks. That you need to produce enough of them. And then other stuff that you produce, like mechanics to capture enemy wrecks or repair your own wrecks, and more scout vehicles like light tanks, rangers, they're at their best alongside an adequate main battle tank force. It's like APCs for Soviets, they're great, but they're better because APCs are great for crushing. They bounce bullets, so they're good for screening, and they're a good early game unit. They can be used for Gren drops, engineers, and thieves. So they're very good, and they can run in and crush the enemy infantry during a battle, during engagements. But they are at their best when you've got enough main battle tanks to screen your force, get the enemy to commit, then use your APCs from the flanks to crush the enemy. That's when they're at their best, when they've got main battle tanks with them. So it's great using mechanics to keep your tank numbers up and take the enemy wrecks and repair your own. It's very good, but that should supplement your standard tank force that you already have. You can't maintain a decent tank force without a decent basic tank force being produced. You know, you need that, because they're your basic elements. Tanks and infantry and bringing MCVs with you, they're the essential elements for combat. You know, if you've got loads of infantry and artillery, you saw, it doesn't matter. You need tanks as well. And there's an APC build where players use the APCs instead of main battle tanks, instead of heavies. They just use APCs, and you produce them early on and use them to screen your troops and crush the enemy. And it works. I've seen it work, but they're still, and they are good APCs, but they're at their best when they're in addition to a main battle tank force. That's just how it is. You know, these heavy tanks and medium tanks, it's the best way to soak up enemy fire, screen your troops, provide them with view range. It's the best way to do it. Then these extra specialist units and tactics will add to that. But there you go, there's the army graph. My opponent did well there. Here's the earnings, and some ups and downs for me at the start. That's not good, and a few spikes there, probably infiltrations, and yeah, my opponent was losing ups and downs at the same rate. So yeah, his infiltrations are probably responsible for that one, but my opponent did well. It looks, to be fair, if I just go back again, look at the army graph, they're above me, and the earnings graph, they're above me. So for the first half of the game, my opponent was, you know, they were beating me. But there's my finishing army. Not a lot. Few heavy tanks. Got an APC because I rebuilt one. Got 3 engineers and a small group of infantry. Not a lot at all. I've got 20% vision. Yeah, it's a 13,300 army value I've got left. Not a lot at all. But I lost 24 structures because of my opponent cutting across the map like that. All that artillery pounding. It was very good. So yeah, I lost 24 structures. My opponent lost 19. I killed 152 units. My opponent killed 329. So the Soviet hordes were thinned a fair bit. There was a lot of pixels lost in this battle, but it had to be done, and victory is what matters. Those pixels weren't lost in vain. But I destroyed 66,000 credits worth of my opponent's assets. My opponent destroyed 81,000 credits worth of mine. So it was all those structures they destroyed and the attacks they fought off, that army they defeated, you know, they did very well, and there's the proof of it. No support powers in effect as yet. Bit early. Well, it's not early, but I don't have an airfield, which is why I haven't got support powers in effect, but I was aiming to build an iron curtain, and I just didn't get that far, and had to fall back on using the radar dome for thieves. I had to fall back on that. I had to do something. And use that decent-sized army to overrun that while I took hold of the enemy's cash supply, and then I got over 2.5 grand out of the final infiltration, so it proved worth it in the end, because not only is that 2.5 grand worth 5 thieves, and I only use 3, and you get to spend it, but you're taking it away from the enemy. It has far more value than it first appears. Well, here's production. I'm building basic stuff, infantry, tanks, power. And we have no oil derricks left. They were both lost. But I managed to hold on to 8 ore trucks. and I spent 125,000 credits. My opponent spent 98,000 credits, but because of my infiltrations and stuff, I've got 13,000 credits. My opponent's got over 6,000 credits left anyway. It's always better spent, but it's a healthy economy that has a load of cash. But I was at 31 actions per minute. My opponent was at 29. There's our scores, 714 to 824. So my opponent got a higher score, even though they lost there. So it shows you how well they did. And there's all your graphs and stats and charts for that first replay. I'm going to add a second replay to this post, just, you know, why not? So I'll get straight into that.
Terminated.
Let's have a look. Which one? This one will do.
Battle
And
control
this is a 1v1
initialized.
multiplayer game. We're on Forgotten Plains for this one. And I'm using Russia. My opponent's got France for this one. And I'm using Russia in my usual red colour. I'm in the bottom left. My opponent's in the top right with a bright green colour. And this map is different to the last map, Desert Fight, Desert Storm, because it has 4 oil derricks. Now, you get one close to your base, and that's usually our train and engineer straight away. Yes, I am on this map, because it's like Timian. If you've got an oil derrick that close, then you don't need to escort, you don't need to train 5 rifles to clear the area. It's safe. The enemy can't get here if they sent a guy straight for it. So the engineer's safe to go and capture that immediately. Get your captures underway. If the oil derrick's close enough to your base, you can do that. And if you really want, you know, by the time he gets there and by the time the enemy can reach it, you can have a few rifles in place here anyway. But what I'm doing is I've sent 3 rifles to try and see what the enemy are up to, and the rest I'm using to secure this, the second oil derrick near my base, and I'm hoping it's going to also secure the engineer on his travels. But I lost those 2 rifles. This guy's backing away, and he's been caught. So I know my opponent is moving across here, look. But you see, they've sent a rifleman to escort the engineer. It's best to have an escort with them, but when it's such a close to your oil derrick, so close to your base, you don't need to send rifles first. But just, you know, you do want them escorted. So by the time he's done with his capture, you want rifles to have arrived and to clear the way for him. It's easy for your opponent to have got a rifleman here or here and intercept the engineer on his way. It's very easily done. And I've got my second oil derrick being captured. And my opponent's got the area well secured for their engineer. Both on our war factories now. And my opponent's placed his refineries, one on this patch and one here. But I prefer to have my first 2 refineries on the main patch. I don't know, I just think it gathers money a little more quickly. I think it does. I think it's a bit better for your income, initial income. And now I'm sending out rifle guards. Got to make sure there's no enemy base pushes right next to my base and stuff. You don't want a base push on your expansion patch, because it really puts it puts a spanner in the works, put it that way. But my opponent's engineer, that's not a bad place to put it. It was just a shame that I've got this guy in place already, and that guy's there to, yeah, he'll keep an eye out for enemy forces approaching, but it's also to make sure the enemy aren't base pushing and covering that expansion and guarding it. And I've swapped this guy, because he's a veteran now, I've swapped him for a new recruit, because my veterans belong in my main force, especially in the early game. I do like to take care of my veterans. But don't send your engineers through ore patches on the way to oil derricks. Now, if my opponent sent their engineer from this way to this oil derrick, the guy that was here would have killed it. And this guy would have killed it. But as it was, this guy killed it. Don't send your engineers through ore patches. But by the time my force could arrive and get into formation, I knew that oil derrick would be destroyed. So I engaged here instead. Get some crushes. Nice on the way through, but nah, lost it. And my opponent got a nice bunch of crushes with that light tank. It's a veteran. Very nice. And there you go. They absolutely wiped out that small starting army. My opponent's at 4,000. I'm at 1,000 for army value, just slightly over. But yeah, you need that light tank repaired, because it's his early scout vehicle. And with an advantage now, why lose it? But they destroyed one of my oil derricks. I've kept one intact. And my opponent's got two. But like I say, my opponent was going to place his engineer there. Now, that's fine. But just, you know, check with a scout vehicle first, see if there's anyone there. And there's likely to be, because the closest ore patch to the enemy base, they're going to want to check and make sure that there's no base push coming. You know? That's where I put my engineer, in a very similar place. Just not on the enemy side of the map. 7,000 army value to 4 in my opponent's favour. And the light tank is leading the way. And I'm trying to build up a force again, a basic force. And I produced a heavy tank before my second MCV because I didn't want to be without a screening vehicle when I moved out. And my opponent has got medium tanks in place. They're starting to arrive. Here's the second one. No, that's his second MCV. So my opponent did make a medium tank first as well. Now there's their light tank there, trying to clear out my scouts. My second MCV is moving out, and I'm putting it on this side of the expansion just so it's a bit more out of the way. This guy could give warning of approach, even the engineer if need be. But yeah, instead of putting it, say, maybe here like I would like to, I'm putting it on this side. There you go, straight down with the refinery, and we can get an eco transfer done. Needs it doing pretty quickly. And look, that light tank is taking out another scout, so I'm trying to respond and do something about it. We want, like I say, we need an eco transfer, so one should be happening soon. Yeah, there you go, look. As soon as these guys drop off any ore they've got, they will head over to the expansion. My opponent's at 12,000, I'm at 9. In army value. And they're close to my base, and that's why, you see, I'm huddled in my base. I'm struggling here. My expansion's at the edge of the map, vulnerable. But my rifle guards are tracking the enemy movement, so I'm okay. If they were to dare approach through here, they'd get mangled by not even half their number. And I'm preparing for them in case they do. Look, a couple of base defences and barracks ready, and I'm moving out with this force. See what my opponent's got. 16,000 army value to 13,000 in my opponent's favour. And here we go. I thought, well, if I can catch the enemy while they're not in formation, it'll go a long way to winning the engagement. And I've got my closest barracks as primary production, so I can feed my infantry straight into the front line. And I'm not moving forward and engaging too much. My opponent now we're both at 15,000. This tank should have been moved back slightly, but at least it's holding this force in check, holding these guys in place. Now I've lost that tank, but this fresh one is now in a better position, and we're engaging. And my opponent has got medium tanks, and I've got heavies, and they are far superior in engagement. There's another. Now, even though this tank is getting pounded, the enemy aren't shooting my infantry. So yeah, I might lose all my tanks, but it's left me with a nice chunk of infantry, and another tank will soon arrive. And there you go, mechanic. Mechanic's lost. You don't want that. And I'm moving the MCV up. I should have done it sooner. So I had base defences and barracks screening my troops. But, you know, the basics. I'm covering the basics. I'm calling everyone into the front line. And there's my eco transfer. Even the engineer's moving up. He's going to capture this oil derrick. But there's an enemy rifleman there. Will my engineer make it past? It looks like he will. Not bad. And the MCV is moving forward. Now I realise I can't just crash straight into the enemy because they'll be expecting me and gathering forces, building base defences, etc. So what I'm doing is waiting for an extra tank or two and bringing the MCV with me. Minimum requirements, minimal elements. I'd want tanks, infantry, set up the MCV, and then I can have barracks and base defences at the front line with me. This is the base push moment. I'm trying to make it work. And I'm keeping my forces back. And at this point, I was quite worried. I thought, well, hang on a minute. I'm against tanks, defences, production, and I've lost all my vehicles. So it's not great. But they need to be stopped from advancing too far. And then, when a vehicle arrives, it's far superior force with the screening vehicle, and then our base defences are here. Now it can clear any infantry production, and if your opponent has the primary production here, say, a barracks close by, just kill them as they spawn, but my opponent is on the ball. He's got his primary production here, so he can actually gather a force rather than losing them one by one. And I'm calling up everything I can. Look at that front line of barracks over there. 1, 2, 6, 7 barracks in my home base, and I've got an extra one here. But you can never have too many barracks. Your opponent can start destroying them. You always need 7 or more, but they are very good at screening units because it gives you view range, protects your units, your troops from attack, and gives you like your view range and production. You can repair them. So it's a real pain if you're trying to fight your opponent in an engagement and they start placing barracks in front of their men and base defences. It's like, oh, you know, they know what they're doing. And that's what you need to practice doing, getting your base defences and barracks to fight alongside your troops all the time. If you have to fall back and lose a chunk, it doesn't matter. You'll be far better to retreat into a better position when you make your stand. Even if you lose a few units at the front line, retreating is better if you're not ready with all your elements. Just depends how good your opponent is, but look here, look, I'm just placing barracks. The fight is over. The main clash at their base, but they're still producing units and base defences, and I've got to get through all this. And it's so easy to make a mistake with troops. Like, one base defence can kill all the infantry here if it's placed correctly from the enemy. And look at that, those light tanks have been doing some very nice pushes. And I'm getting my base defences on attack anything stance and ordering them to attack enemy targets. I've got, I had a shift command to linking buildings up, but they've lost the MCV, although they could repair it with a mechanic. I'm capturing the refinery, bringing engineers forward. I've taken that oil derrick there, but I think I'm unaware of that. It's too late to check if they were up on the map. But my opponent called it there, and they were right to. Yeah, they had structures and some assets, but yeah, they were in a bad situation, you know. I wouldn't have ended exactly at that point. I would have tried to fall back. There's 2 decent ore patches here, not including this one that they had an expansion at. Plus, this base could have bought time for them, but, you know, to each their own. They didn't want to carry on a losing game. That's fair enough. I just make sure that even if I do lose a game, my opponent leaves with their face blown off, at least. You know. It's all good fun. Right, there's the army graph. Look at that one. Nice. My opponent was, you know, way ahead and gaining forces at a quicker rate than I was. They were building and training more quickly. But I kept up okay, and once the engagement starts, we both suffered losses, and we both had an increase and then another drop, but my opponent's drops were more severe than mine. But yeah, it's a heck of an up-down army graph. But look at, like, the last game, last replay that I showed, my opponent was ahead for a fairly important chunk of the battle again, you know. So they did well, and look, they did better than me for earnings again. It's quite good. It's just at the end it was fairly stable, but my opponent had a nice spike in earnings, but we both did okay for earnings there. Let's have a look. About the same again as what I had left at the end of the last game. A group of heavy tanks, few flamers, 3 engineers, and a small group of infantry. About the same amounts. So yeah, 13,000 army value again. At 29% vision uncovered. And my opponent lost 16 structures. I didn't lose any structures this time. But and my opponent killed 168 units. I killed 201. I destroyed 57,000 credits worth of my opponent's assets. My opponent destroyed 32,000 credits worth of my assets. So, they did okay. No support powers in effect yet. Let's have a look at production. I'm building a second war factory, so I would have then built a power plant and then a radar dome. But I had seven barracks at my base. I've got 9. You see, you can never have too many barracks. Just cover your forces and screen them with them. And your base pushes, keep churning out those barracks, power plants, base defences. Just if your opponent defeats it and pushes you back, it's going to be a pain for them to retake it. and you've got all this to cover your escape of your MCV if necessary. So yeah, the base push is excellent, and MCVs are an essential element. Like tanks and infantry always go together, but an MCV with them, you know, it's essential really. You're fighting at a disadvantage without one. Any engagements without your MCV, one of your MCVs with your main force, you're at a disadvantage fighting like that. I've managed to hang on to this original oil derrick close to my base, but I also took this one from my opponent, so I've got 2 oil derricks. I managed to hang on to 9 ore trucks, and my opponent earned 73,000 credits. I earned 77,000 credits, so we're very close on earnings. And I've got a couple 2.5 grand left. My opponent's got a little bit of cash. But here we are at the basics. I was at 33 actions per minute. My opponent was at 36. And there's our scores. 562 to me, 320 to my opponent. And there's all your stats and graphs and charts for this one. I hope you enjoyed those 2 replays. And if you did, give us a sub and a like. Thank you very much for watching. Take good care of yourselves. And for now, thank you and goodbye.
Battle control terminated.